How do you think that coming up as a, you said 12, 13-year-old, as a
10,
12,
10 was when I started.
yeah, as like a 10-year-old, as a young, a young boy at that era where New York was more dangerous, there was an element of, you know, aggression, I feel like, to the city. There was an element of poverty, and there still is, but it's not, it definitely is not like how it was. So when you're coming up that age in that environment, that's your environment, and that's the environment of all your friends. How do you think that affects your mind and the way that you think about the world?
Um, all right, I could definitely tell you, yeah, New York was very different. Me personally, I've been stabbed 5 different times in my life, like to the point where I was hospitalized each time. Um, I've been shot at a bunch of times. Luckily, no, never got hit with a bullet. But and all of that stuff had nothing to do with graffiti. It was just New York back in the day, man. Like, yo, what the fuck you looking at type shit, you know? Like walking down the street or someone you bump your shoulder and boom, all of a sudden you're fighting, you know? It's like, or just people trying to rob you. I mean, I remember on the M train, you know, I was coming home. I was by myself. I had a polo jacket. I think it was 93. It was just a windbreaker, but it said it was navy blue and it says polo on it in white. And these three dudes, you know, they came up on me and they went at me. They're trying to get my jacket, and they were pulling it off, and I was holding my jacket in a way that they couldn't rip it off, and then they had me like where my I was kind of bent over facing down, and they had it off my stomach, and then one of the dudes had a razor, and he went and he started cutting my stomach open, and he dropped the razor because I guess the blood was slippery or something. And I saw it and it fell right in front of me. And I picked it up and I came up and I blasted him like from his chin up to like the top of his head. I wasn't even aiming. I just was just trying to get 3 kids off of me kind of thing. And he screamed and he like was trying to hold his cheek together. And it's like, and I felt bad. I was like, damn, I fucked that dude up. Like I wasn't like, because it's a lot of people. It's like violence fighting one thing. Like when you get into the whole stabbing and like putting people in hospitals and stuff like that. Like some people say, oh yeah, he deserved it, but you know what? You get older, you think about it different. I guess it's like I don't know that kid. I'll never find out who he was, but I know he will never forget me because he's got a huge scar on his face now. And the ironic story about that is like that incident, the jacket was ripped like all the way to my sleeve, like a straight rip. And then I met up and it was covered with blood. And DESA, I was gonna throw it away, and DESA was like, "No, fuck that, give it to me." And he went and he had it stitched up, and he wears it to this day.
Wow,
He still
wow,
has
dude.
it. Yeah, he got the blood dry cleaned out, and so yeah, I mean, like I'm like I said, I've been hospitalized for getting stabbed multiple times.
And it had nothing to do with it; just had to do with the area.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Ridgewood, and Ridgewood borders Bushwick. And back then, Bushwick was not the hipster Bushwick that we have today. It was different. It was a lot of abandoned lots, a lot of drug dealers. I mean, if you ever Troutman, Knickerbocker, Troutman, my boy Deck used to live there, and it was so bad. I mean, it was just stick up kids, drug dealers, drug addict prostitutes, and yeah, it was drug spots all over the place. I mean, everyone knows back in the '90s, Bushwick was the place if you wanted to get weed. There was so many places. I mean, it was every 2 blocks there was a weed spot. And so yeah, we had to fight a lot. The crew I grew up with, and it was like MTA and FTR, and we just had to fight just because of the circumstances. It was a lot. Even if you didn't want to fight. Like I'll never forget the first time I fought a fair one. I fought like brawl fights before, but like when you fight a fair one, it's a whole different ball game. It's like in one-on-one combat, and the winning and losing is different. In a brawl, a lot of you could pull in and out of that brawl. You know what I'm saying? Like throw a shot in it, or somebody hits you from behind, you turn around, you start squaring off with him, and then he gets hit from the side. It's like mayhem. But when it's one on one, it's like, you gotta know what you're doing a little bit, because you can't fight for 10 minutes, because unless you're super trained, I mean, 10 minutes is a long time. You're gonna be tired because every shot you're giving it your best,
Yeah.
and you get tired, fast. So yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy hearing about that and how much things have changed in New York, and how, like, me sitting here now and really thinking about it and thinking about what you're saying, it's like you're growing up in a, not to exaggerate or nothing, but it's like you're growing up in a style of war. The city is a dangerous place. You're wearing a nice jacket and you might get fucking actually sliced open and get into a crazy actual life or death situation. Nowadays you can take the train and wear pretty much whatever the fuck you want and it's going to be fine for the most part. You might get really unlucky, but it's not really like that. And I think that violence and war aspect can permeate throughout our society and permeate into graffiti and affect how people go about painting graffiti. How do you think that influenced the way that MTA, you and your friends, when you'd be going around certain neighborhoods and you're trying to go, at as many places as you can, doing something that might attract negative attention in this time period? How do you think that affected the way you went about shit, the way you would operate?
I think it made us a tighter crew for sure. Like we stuck together because you strength in numbers, and hmm.
Would you be afraid when you were going out painting of these things? Like after you got
Yeah,
stabbed like
not
that?
afraid, but you're always on guard. Like I mean, back in the day, especially like painting in Manhattan, for example, there were certain spots that everyone always did. There was a lot of parking lots. Like I remember on 18th Street, that area, like where Limelight was, everybody wanted to do those spots, and you would run into people, and sometimes you get into a fight, or but you would run into writers, Like I don't know if that happens nowadays with the newer people, but back then, yeah, you would run into people, and also it was a lot like beef was different back then. Like beef was something you just accepted. It just happened. Like it was like the more you got up, the more beef you had, and 90% of the time you don't even know why, So I don't want to talk about who or what, but yeah, and then it was a lot of maintenance, like repairing your fillings and stuff like that, which I just gave up on. I was just like, as soon as I did it, I'm done. Boom, and then I would just move on to the next one. I wouldn't fix it anymore. I'd be like, fuck it.
Yeah. How would you approach beef back then, though, when you would
Um,
engage it?
no, I mean, if I had beef with someone, if it was like a one-time thing, somebody goes over you, some toy shit, they're trying to get attention, I wouldn't give them no play, because then, they're just trying to get a name,
Yeah.
cheap fame off you. But if it turned into like a war, we went all in. I don't want to talk about it too
Of
much to
course.
ignite old things, but yeah, it was what it was back then. You don't really see it often anymore. I don't think. I mean, they would the I don't know. The last war that I had was I don't want to talk bad about him because he's deceased. Is Kes 5, rest in peace. We just were both put against each other from outside forces, and it was all regarding the death of VE, which a lot of people speculate what happened and this and that, and the truth is nobody knows what happened. I probably know more than anybody because I've dealt with the homicide on his case. I was there, in the hospital. I seen him dead in the hospital with his eyes open, the bullet hole in his rib cage, and he had no clothes on because they ripped all his clothes off when they brought him into the ER to try to find out, where he was bleeding or whatever. That's the procedure. And yeah, and then his daughter was born right away after that, so he never got to see her. And now she's 27 years old with 2 kids.
Wow.
So it's bugged out, and she looks just like him. Like it's insane. Like the eyes, the nose. Yeah, it's bugged out.
How do you deal with a loss like that? How did you deal with a loss like that?
Um, for a long time, I did what every old school New Yorker did, man. I just put an H on my back and handled it. Walk, keep it tough, shoulders up, chin up. And, I still do that, but I didn't realize until like recently how much PTSD and how much anger I have. Like everyone that meets me says like, "Oh, you're such a like humble dude," but like, yo, deep down, I just realized this is a realization I really made like this year.
Yeah.
I'm deep down, I'm a very angry human being, and when something happens in my life or somebody does something wrong to me, that comes out of me in a really bad way. Like I have no off switch when it comes to the anger, but it's hard to get me there. But it's all pent up. So then when something does trigger the release, it just comes out. Like I put myself in harm's way to do somebody bad. If it's justified in my mind. And but I started doing therapy because someone suggested it because they said I had so much loss and shit. I mean, look, my younger brother died, but VE, DG. I mean, there's so many people. You know, Asp and then Zexor. I mean, I remember when Zexor was born. You know what I mean? And it's like I was friends with his dad. His dad was there when I got my tag in 1988, and it's like they both died very similar circumstances, which is crazy. But overall, the point I'm trying to make is that I did some therapy, and the therapist pointed something out that I have a lot of loss in my life, and that I probably have some kind of survivor's guilt or PTSD and shit like that from all the violence and things like that, and being locked up, and all this combination of all this like stuff that creates anxiety that's never really dealt with turns to PTSD and anger, and anger creates the anxiety. And then she made me count all the funeral cards of the funerals I went to, and the number is 55 of 50, that I went to. The number of people that passed is probably higher because there's a few people that passed away that I did not go to their funerals, but because they either died in a different state or something like that. But yeah, and that number doesn't count like my aunts and uncles or grandfathers like that died of natural causes. It was people that died before they should have. Car accidents, murders, drug overdoses. Pretty much that's it. Maybe like two or three died from like cancer, like normal things. Not normal, but you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
life. But the rest was, didn't have to be. You know,
How do you find peace throughout this storm?
I'm still trying to figure that out.
Do you think graffiti helps you?
Graffiti is the only time. This is a good question that you asked me, because this is another realization that I made, is that when I'm doing graffiti, especially like real illegal graffiti, I'm not talking about like murals. Murals are cool, fun, and stuff like that. But when I'm doing like the real shit, I'm not. I don't have anxiety. I'm not thinking about the past. I'm not thinking about the future. I'm in the moment. I'm present, and I feel good, and that's why I still do it, and I don't stop doing it. Um, this is something there that, yeah, like I said, I'm in the moment. I'm present. I'm not, because most people aren't present in life. People are always in their head like, oh, what about this? What about that? The future or the past, and it's hard to be present and enjoy every moment. But like I said, when I'm bombing, I'm present. I'm like happy inside. Like there's an energy that comes with it that's beautiful. I mean, it's and you can't buy it, and you can't cheat it, and you can't fake that shit. It's like the real shit. And I respect all the people that are bombing, like really bombing. I love that shit. It's raw, it's uncut, you know. So yeah.
I think that being present is probably one of the most difficult things to do, and um, living in the past and thinking about the past, or living in the future and worrying about what that's going to be like because of the unpredictable nature of it brings so much stress already, aside from everything else. And I think that one of the greatest treasures is just being able to be right now in a almost like meditative animalistic state where you're not thinking about tomorrow, you're not thinking about what's next, you're not thinking about things really, you're just being. And I find that probably a lot of people feel that within graffiti because, especially for example, you talk about the trains, like you're in a situation, you're kind of in a situation, you're not just on the street where you walk every day. There's elements of real danger. People have been burned in there, people have died touching the third rail, people have been smashed by.
Yeah,
You have to be
DG died that
super
way.
super aware. Your focus has to be almost like a sniper to keep yourself safe, and that alone is going to make you act in a way where you're forced to be present. Um, and that's a nice feeling, which is mad strange, right? Because you're putting yourself in a fucked up situation, but then you'll feel more peace than if you were at home.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about the dangers and the way shit can go. I can tell you a quick funny story, and it involves ASP as well. It was 1993. I forgot what month it was, but I know it was 93 because we wrote 93 on the train. But ASP, um, I had moved out of my house in 91 when I was 14, but I still had a room at my mom's house just to keep her happy. But I moved out because my parents were very strict, Eastern European, and Polish background. They just had different ethics. They didn't want me to stay out late, stuff like that. So I had a great childhood, good parents, and but this graffiti thing got me like hooked, and I was like I had to stay out all night and do it. So, but in '93, I was spending the night at my parents' house, and Asp had rang the bell, and he asked for GIZ. My mom hated graffiti. I mean, to the point like she knew everything bad that started in our lives was somehow related to that, or she thought she just tied it to it. So he's like, I went downstairs and I'm like, yo, dude, what the fuck, man? It was late. It was like 11 o'clock at night. He's like, yo, you got any paint? I'm like, yeah. He's like, yo, let's go do the M yard. That's where I used to live, right behind the M yard. And I was like, all right, fuck it. Went upstairs, got whatever paint I can get. Went downstairs, and me and him went down. We walked down the station, the tracks to the yard, and there was two yellow work bum trains, and we were like, oh shit, let's fuck up the work bum trains. So we start painting, and I looked down the row to where the train ended, and there was like a walkway there where the conductors would go into their trains, and I saw a dude. He like walked by, and then he did like a step back and looked, like he looked at us, and I was like, yo, bro, I was like, this homeboy just seen us. And he was like, nah, don't worry about it, man. Just keep going. So I'm painting, trying to hurry up. And then, um, like maybe 5 or 6 dudes came around the corner on our row, and they start walking towards us with flashlights and stuff, work bums, and I'm like, yo, we gotta go. And he's like, nah, fuck that. And then like, I don't know where the fuck he found it, but like back in the day, I mean, they still have them. They had these yellow paddles to keep the doors open when they were working on the trains. All of a sudden, Asp had one in his hand, and he's fucking running towards the work bums, banging the train as he's running. And he's this big Spanish guy, like fucking like he looked hood, like you know what I mean. So they stopped and they just turned around and ran away. And then I'm like packing up, ready to, I'm like, it's over, like, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm packing up, it's done. He's like, nah, dude. He goes, fuck that, finish your shit. So I was like, all right. And it's funny because if you see the picture, you'll see like the G and the I are filled in, like kind of like the lines are like in the right row, and the Z is just like, whoa, like let's get out of here type shit. And then like we finished, we outlined it, and then he's like, I'm like, let's go. He's like, well, no, no, no. He goes, yo, take pictures. And then we took pictures in front of it. He took a picture of me, I took a picture of him, and I have those pictures still.
Wow.
And I think I told this story for the Revs book. And then Asp was like, yo, let's go to the store and get 40s. And I'm like, yo, dude, that's where the cops are going to be coming from, because that's the only way. So he was like, he didn't care, though. He didn't care about going to jail. Like, it was not big, it was like big deal to him. And I ended up convincing him. I was like, yo, why don't we walk from Fresh Pond to Forest train station and do some rooftops and kill the paint? And he was like, oh, that's such a good idea. It was like using reverse psychology on him to not go down into the street. So we did. We walked from Fresh Pond to Forest. We did a couple rooftops, and then we walked from Forest to Seneca, did some rooftops, and then we finished all the paint, and we got up to Seneca train station. And as soon as we got up there, the stairs used to have this cement kind of partition. Nowadays it's like glass blocks, but back then it was all cemented. And I seen this guy pop his head up and pop down, and I said, "Yo, somebody's popping their head up," and he's like, "Yo, man, you're so fucking paranoid," and like it wasn't paranoid. I'm just very cautious when I paint. That's why I never got caught bombing, like, and that's why the vandals never found out who I was until much later on, 'cause of social media and shit. But anyway, it turned out to be a uniformed cop, and he got up and he put on his hat, and he was like, "Yo, you two, come over here," because we just got off the tracks, and Asp said something like, "Yeah, fuck you," like, and then he starts like running towards us, and we turned around and we booked back onto the tracks, but we didn't like walk the stairs down. We literally jumped from the platform onto the catwalk, and back then the catwalk wasn't the yellow pretty catwalks they have today. It was like wood, and it was bending, and some pieces were missing and not fastened right. And it was just like, I remember in the air like having a quick thought like, shit, I hope that don't fucking fall and break through and land in the street. And then like we're running down the catwalk, but the cop wasn't track certified, so he couldn't enter the catwalk. Back then you had to be track certified. It was different, and they would have to stop the trains and stuff like that. And so we're like halfway through, and I told Asp, I'm like, "Yo, chill. We can't go to the next station. They're gonna cut us off." He's like, "So what do you want to do?" I was like, "We'll slide down the pole." And that was the only time I seen Asp concerned because he had no fear in him. But he looked down. He was like, "Nah, fuck that, man." I was like, "Dude, trust me." I was like, "Yo, follow me." I was like, "Use the bolts for your feet. You put your hand into the I-beam, and you just shimmy down. I was like, "Watch me do it, and then just do it slow. We're not in a rush. The cops ain't coming down this way." And he was like, he seen me doing it, and he was like, "All right, bet." So he did it. We both did it. We got down. He was like, "Damn, that was fucking great." I was like, so then we heard the cops were all in the streets right now looking for us, because we heard the revving of the engines, like the and the lights in between the window. Because where we went down, we weren't in the street. We were in between two buildings. It was like being in the middle of a block. So we ended up in the backyards of like all these houses. So they didn't know how to find us, and we couldn't. Asp wanted to go into the street, and I was like, "Dude, we gotta chill." And luckily, in the backyard we climbed, there was a pool. So Asp was like, "Yo, let's go in the pool." And I was like, "All right, whatever keeps him from wanting to go to the street, I'm down." We took off our pants, we're sitting in our boxer shorts, and we go in the pool, and we're just chilling. And I'm keeping an eye up on the tracks, which are right above our heads, and I'm paying attention to see if I see any cops, but more importantly, if the train is still running. Because if the trains are keep running by, then they're not going to hit the tracks, because the train, they would have stopped service. So train started running. I'm like, all right, we're good, And then Asp was like, "Yo," he's like, "Get out." I'm like, so I'm looking around. I'm like, "What the fuck?" I get out, and he ended up fucking taking a shit in the pool. I was just like, "Dude, what the fuck, man? That's so wrong, man. Like, why would you do that?" He's like, "Man, fuck that." It was like some shitty above ground pool, like 3-4 feet high or whatever. And then we ended up just climbing out, going to the street, and just drank, ate something, and laughing about the night. But that's just one story.
Wow, man. Wow. How do you feel now after a lifetime of doing shit like that and doing graffiti and doing it at a very high level in multiple dimensions, and landing where you're landing now, uh, being alive still, seeing all the changes within the world and within New York City, and how do you feel?
I'm grateful that I'm alive, and I'm grateful that I have freedom, because I was locked up. I in '96 I had gotten arrested for I'm not saying this that I'm proud of, but I stabbed 3 kids up pretty bad, and I ended up in prison for 3 counts of attempted murder, 3 counts of assault in the first degree, 3 counts of assault in the second degree, and 1 count of maiming and menacing, which I'm not even sure how they came up with that charge. But being 19, I just turned 19, thank God. Otherwise, I would have been with the juveniles in Rikers. I was with the adults, which is a lot safer to some degree. The juveniles, they would just cut you for nothing. But in the adults, they were a little different. But yeah, in '96, I was locked up. I was locked up with old dirty bastard. He was there at the time, and I was facing a lot of time. Like they were giving me cop outs for like 7.5, 21 years. And when you're 19, that's the same thing as life. You know what I mean? Your mind just goes life. And my bail was $250,000 cash, so nobody could bond me out. Because nobody had $250,000 cash. Uh, Two of the kids, they were in ICU for like 2 months while I was in Rikers, and one like almost he wasn't gonna pull through. It looked like, and it was scary because I was like, if he dies, it turns to murder. It's a whole different thing, and you just think about life different, man. And when you're locked up and you have to get cuffed up to go everywhere and do everything, and people telling you when you eat, when you do this, you have to watch your back for people. You're in there with fucking Rikers Island. You're in there with 96. Yo, it was crazy. I mean, people were getting cut all the time, fucked up. I seen one kid. He got pulled into the when I was in the dorm. He got pulled into the shower and he got raped. And he
And
came.
you've seen this.
I didn't see him get raped, but I knew he got. Everybody knew what time it was.
Yeah.
It was a dorm. There was no cells. So it was like he came out crying and shit. And I seen this one transvestite that was in our dorm commit suicide. It was in the middle of the night, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was funny actually. I ran into that kid that writes map, that does the M's, and he ended up finding me somehow. Oh, actually, it was my own fault. I stole markers from the art class. They had art class one day, and it was Crayola markers, and I had like busted them open, and I made my own little mops, and I would bomb the hallways whenever I was able to go somewhere or do something, and I would just write. And he found me somehow and ended up like being in my dorm, and he was there when that person killed themselves. But yeah, he was in there for a graffiti charge, But I know he had killed somebody before that. He did 2.5 to 6, I think, for that. But that's his business. I don't want to talk about it. Um, but yeah, he was in there on a graffiti charge. I was there on the attempted murder, and then luckily, I did not do 7.5 to 21 years. I only had to do half a year, and then I was sentenced. My sentence was 1.5 to 3 after a long time of going to court. But the judge converted it to what they call a 6-5 split. So it's 6 months incarceration plus 5 years of like the highest level of probation. It's pretty much like being on parole, and it was zero tolerance. I remember it was like, I think it was called QSIV. It was like some kind of like intensive supervision. I had to go see my PO twice a week for the first year, and then once a week for the second year, and then the last 3 years, once every 2 weeks. And they never let me off early, so that slowed my bombing career down big time. So in '97 was when I kind of like slowed down a lot. I still painted, don't get me wrong, but it was not like crazy anymore. Like I had to like chill. And I'll tell you one thing, like when you're locked up like that with that anxiety, like think with all those years on your mind, on your back, like when you get out, man, there's like that's when you know what freedom really tastes like. It's like, because I got out, luckily I had made bond, not unknowingly. I came back from court one day, and one of the kids I stabbed up, his girl went to the DA after a couple months of me being locked up, and she told him like that I was really just defending myself, and that I warned everybody before I stabbed him, which is all true because I didn't get caught during the stabbing. I got caught like a week later because DESA's girlfriend at the time was cheating on DESA with one of the kids I stabbed, and she ratted me out. So cops came and found me, and one day, when she went there, Um, and she said that they dropped my bail to 25,000 bondable, and I was able to get bonded out that day. But I didn't know that because I was in court, but I was always in the bullpens. I never saw the judge. I went every Monday for 6 months, and yeah, it was crazy. I remember I came back from court, and the CO was like, "Yo," it's like, just said my name. He's like, "Yo, you made bail," and I was just like, "What the fuck? What do you mean I made bail?" I was like, I went from like conditioning my mind that I'm not getting out for like at least a decade, you know, to like now I'm getting out like right now, like instantaneously. It was like such a reverse in mindset, you know. But it was just Rikers was crazy, man. A lot of crazy things, you know. I got to see Wu-Tang Clan perform live there, which was bugged out. I was coming home, I was on the bus, and in HDM, Wu-Tang was performing live, and they let us into the yard. I wasn't in HDM, I was in C73, but the bus that was transporting me, the guards, they all wanted to see it too, so they like put us in a chain gang, and they were like, "Yo, if you guys behave, you could see this." So we saw it, and I was just like, "Yo, nobody's ever gonna believe this." And then like 2 years after I got out, I was talking to Ket, and Ket was like, I was telling the story like this, and he was just listening. He's like, I sponsored that event with Stress Magazine. I was like, what? He was like, yeah, I was on stage, and I was like, well, I was in the crowd. I was an inmate, and then like it was just ironic because he published it in Stress Magazine, and I was looking, and I was like trying to find out like where I was standing in the crowd. I was standing by they had these like armored vehicles. They look like tanks that would shoot tear gas if there's a riot. So I was standing over there, and I've been bugging Ket to get those pictures, Ket, because I want to find myself in there and zoom in on it. It'd be funny. It goes with the story. But yeah, so when I got out, I kind of switched my life up a lot. I was big into drug selling. I sold a lot of drugs when I moved out from 14 till 19. All I did was sell drugs to support myself, and like a lot. You know, I went from selling club drugs to uh, becoming like selling kilos of cocaine. Towards the end, that's when it started getting dangerous too. So mixed blessing in disguise that I got locked up. Because I felt the pressure. I had like really good cocaine, and it was like so good. I never was into it, but like I knew how good it was because I went from selling like little chunks of it that my dealer that supplied me the club drugs. He was like, "Yo, try this out," and I would just give them out, and then like my Bieber went crazy. People were like, "Yo, I need more, I need more, I need more." That was such good shit. And then dealers found out that I had good shit, and then they were hitting me up. They were like, "Yo, I want a half a brick. I want a brick." And then like within 2 weeks, I was selling like bricks of cocaine. I never did before, and it was like the cash flow was like huge. And yeah, that was a couple months, and then I got locked up, for stabbing those kids up, and that ended my drug career, luckily. So a lot.
Wow.
It was like a mixed blessing in disguise, because you know what? The track I was on in '96, and no, I'm not saying this to brag or be proud either, but like I heard a lot of people went to the hospital because of me. A lot of people that I'll never know how it turned out for them, because you would end up in a fight in the street, and you would stab someone, and then you never see them again. And it's like that weighed a lot on me as I got older too. And I'm like, damn, I wonder like what happened with that. That dude's all right. Like what turned out like for him, I'll never know. It's similar for like people that stabbed me. I got stabbed by people. I never saw them again. And it's like I wonder if they think that like, yo, like when I got stabbed up in my stomach and my back, the one I got stabbed in my back went through my kidney. It's fucked up. My arm severed my tendon. Dude tried to stab me in the chest. Lost complete. I couldn't move my arm or my hand at all. Had major surgeries to fix that. Luckily, it's all good now. But that dude, I don't know what happened to him. He doesn't know what happened to me. It's just New York back in the day. So
When you stab somebody like that, and you're in this at that time period of your life when you're like doing these violent things, do you think that you're doing it because you're naturally a violent, angry person, or do you think that you're doing it because of straight up like fear and self protection of like, if I don't do it, you know what I mean? Like you're going out with that mindset of protecting yourself in this essential fucking war zone that you're living in. What do you think is it that makes a person, or you in this instance, do something like that? That was the first part of my question, and then the second one is what your mind goes to at a young age when you think, truly believing, damn, I'm gonna be in jail for the next 10 years, which truly is like a fucking eternity. Like it's not, and it goes by, but it is. Like that's crazy to think about. Like, however old anyone who's listening to this is, just be like, all right, I go in tomorrow and I get out when I'm X age I am now plus 10. That's fucking crazy. But yeah, so in terms of the stabbing, what do you think it was?
I think it was it. All right, like I said, growing up fighting a lot, it was like you just naturally in the '90s, everyone carried weapons, whether it was brass knuckles or a knife. Everyone at least had a razor blade, and if not, some people packed guns. I never did. That wasn't my thing. It was more for self protection, because I've been in fights where I had no problem having a fist fight, but then homeboy pulls out a knife or a razor. You can get around it, but it's it turns to a different thing. So you want to have one on you too, just in case that happens, and then it levels the playing field a little bit, and the rage part was more like growing up on the border of Bushwick, like I was saying. It's like getting picked on, getting robbed, like, and all those things, like, being a victim at a young age, and have like, I mean, I don't know how much time we got on this, but I could tell you a crazy story of the first time I got robbed. It was nuts. Um,
You got time.
yeah, so like to give you an example, it was 1991. It was I went to a rave at NASA. It's when that NASA had the shelter on Varick Street, downtown, and the trains back then were crazy. Like it was all stick-up kids all day long. You couldn't take the train at night alone. So we went with a posse, and my boy Ketch was DJing, and I was 14 or 13, depending. I don't know what time of the year it was. Um, and we went in a group of like 20 to 25 heads, and we went to the club. And the only reason we were able to get in was because Ketch was DJing, because we were underage. We were 13, 14-year-old kids, like going into a club. And as soon as we got inside, everyone's, grabbing flyers. They used to always have these like index card style flyers for clubs. And I see everybody's like ripping off the end of it and putting it on their tongue. And I'm like bugging. I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? So Catch comes up to me and he rips rips mine off and he goes, "Put this on your tongue." I said, "For what?" He said, "It's gonna make you laugh," But he's telling me in this like super loud environment where you could barely hear. You know what I mean? It's like the music's like boom, 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 like vibrating through you. So I put it on my tongue, and then I went to the bathroom with my friend Tef, who also passed away, rest in peace. And Tef, he put up a sticker in the bathroom, but he didn't put it down good enough. It was like peeled half down. So I was behind him, and I, just pushed it down for him. And there was a bouncer that saw me do that, and he thought I put the sticker up. So he grabbed me and he threw me out of the club. So I remember I had a brand new Carhartt jacket on. It was like the jacket that Bishop from Juice, and Tupac was wearing it. It's like one of them, and it was hot back then. It was like everyone wanted one of those, And it was snowing out. It was the winter. And I remember it was big chunks of snow, and I was like, "Fuck!" And there was no way to contact anybody. I couldn't get back in the club, and now I'm by myself, skinny white boy wearing a Carhartt jacket in Manhattan in a blizzard, and like it was beeper days. There was no way to reach nobody. So I was like, fuck it, I gotta take the train home. So I had a plan. I was like, yo, if I get on the train, if I get on the first car, at least the fucking conductor's there. If something happens, there's some chance of help. But I knew I was gonna, because it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I knew I was gonna be going through the thick of it, because to get to where I lived, you had to go through that J and the M train through hard parts of Brooklyn back then, Bushwick, like I said before, it was cool. And anyway, so I'm walking down Canal Street, and it was so bombed. There was so much like graffiti tags and stuff. And I was like looking at it, and then I started getting this euphoric feeling. out of nowhere. And I was just like, yo, and it felt so good, and it came on so strong that I started like grinning like ear to ear like the Joker almost. Like I couldn't get this stupid grin off my face. And I was by myself, and I was just like, damn. I was like, and I had this plan to get on the train and do all this stuff. And then I'm like, oh shit, like I had a realization. It was the acid kicking in. That's what Catch gave me. It was a sheet. The flyers back then, it was so crazy. The flyers were dipped in acid. So I was, first time I ever did acid. I didn't know nothing about it. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that it existed. I never even heard of LSD. So I'm tripping really hard now. So I get to the train, hop the turnstile because we didn't have money back then, and I get on the train, and because I was tripping so hard, I got on the last car instead of the first car, and the train's going. I'm like, oh, I realize it. I'm like, shit, I gotta get to the first car, you know. So I am going through the train, and I'm grinning and laughing, and like almost every car had just young stick up kids in it, like hooligans all day long, and I'm this white boy with this hot jacket, nice sneakers, I was, because I went to the club deep, so I wasn't worried about it, getting robbed. And I remember like there was this group of black kids halfway through the car, and they were like, one kid, he put his arms on the two straps like to stop like get in my way, and I just couldn't get this dumbass grin off my face and laughing, and like I just looked him in the eyes and like kept walking because I didn't know what else to do. Like I wasn't gonna stop, and he just moved out of the way. And he was like, he said to his boys, I remember like something like, "Yo, you see that white kid, man? He was like had the devil in his eye or some shit." And then like whatever. Long story short, I made it to the I made it to the first car, and at that point, I sat, excuse me, across from the conductor booth, and there was nobody in the car. And I was like, I sat down and I remember feeling like relieved. I was like, oh, thank God. I'm like, now I have like an adult, like a couple feet away that could possibly save me if something happens. So we pull into Essex train station, and as soon as the doors open, like 8 kids get on. And, one kid sits right next to me on my right, one kid sits on the left. One kid stands in front of me. The others are like, around. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And I said something stupid off my head because I was tripping so hard on acid. I said something like, because I knew what time it was. I was like, yo, who's going to set it off or something. And they were like, and then one kid was like, yo, you write GIZ, right? And I mean, I was a toy back then. So I was like, how the fuck this kid knows me? And he was like, yo, we played handball. Because I used to play handball. That was the thing back in the day. I used to hustle and play handball for money. So he said the park that we played at, Madison Park, and I was just like, all right, so he must know. I didn't remember him, but he remembered me. So I was like, we must have crossed paths. And then they were like, yo, what's up with you, bro? You like bugged out, like your eyes all fucked up. Like, what are you like grinning about? And I was like, I took acid, and I remember I said it really loud, like because I couldn't control it. I was tripping so hard, and they were all like there was like a minute pause, and then they were like, "Oh shit, yo, I heard about that shit, yo." They all of a sudden I became like somebody they were gonna rob to like a point of interest. Like they wanted to know about it. They were like, "Tell us about it. How does it feel, yo? My boy told me about it. I was gonna do it, but da 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 da." So they were like chilled out. Like they moved away from me, and they were like talking to me, trying like they were curious, and they were talking to me about it and stuff like that. And then the one kid, he kept talking about this 24-hour paint store in Bushwick, and I was just like, yeah, all right, I'm not buying that one. But like stick up kids back then, they'll tell you anything. They'll be like, yeah, this, that, blah blah. So anyway, we get to Myrtle and Broadway, and that's when you had to transfer from the J train to the M train back then. And yo, those stations back then, for those people that were around in '91, like the lights didn't work, they were bombed, like there was drug addicts. It was not a safe feeling environment. So they got off with me because they were going to Bushwick, and I had to go transfer also. So I thought my head, but they were gonna try to rob me, when we got off the train, which they didn't. And it was like I said, it was snowing and stuff like that. And two of the kids were acting cool with me, like they were talking to me the most, and I just couldn't stop laughing and grinning because I was tripping on acid so hard. And we got on the train when the M pulled up, and we got to the next stop, which was Central Ave. And when we got to Central Ave, I don't know if they pre-planned this or whatever. They like kind of like roughly like put their arms behind my shoulders, and they're like, come on, we're gonna go to that 24-hour paint store now, and pushed me off the train. And now I'm sitting on Central Avenue train station. It's bombed. The lights are all fucked up. It's like I said, it's old school. And the train leaves, and now I'm like, fuck, they're gonna rob me now, But they didn't, you know. And they're like, come on, man, we're gonna go to that 24-hour spot. We're gonna do some tags and shit, and blah blah blah. Get some beers, all this shit, whatever they were saying. So I was at the mercy of them because, like I said, it was like maybe 8 of them, you know. Um, and we're walking down the stairs, and when we halfway down the stairs, nobody said a word. The black kid who was the youngest, I think he was the youngest. He looked the youngest. He was in front of me. He turned around and he put a revolver right up to my throat. And no, like I said, nobody said anything. Nobody said, "Yo, shut up, run your shit," nothing. Like one kid unzippered my jacket. One kid was going in my pocket. Another kid's taking my beeper. No words were spoken at all. It was just like these kids were pros. Like they did this every day, you know. And the black kid just kept looking at me, and then he started pushing the gun up under my chin like really hard, which made me like my chin go up. And now it's wintertime. It's outdoors. I'm in a t-shirt, and then they were gonna take my sneakers, and then like one of them made a joke and said, "Nah, those shits a whack or something." So luckily they didn't take them because it was snowing out. And then they, most of them walked down the stairs with my shit, after they evict me, and the kid with the gun, man, he just kept looking at me, like we were looking at each other eye to eye, and he cocked the hammer back on the revolver, and I'll never forget that. And I was just like, I was still had this stupid grin from the acid, but I was like, I remember I said to him, I said, "Yo, please don't shoot me," and his boy like grabbed his arm and like was like, "Nah, chill," because he looked like he wanted to shoot me just to get a rep, because he was probably my age. He was probably like 13 at least, like just a young kid, and at that age, like you don't think about the impact of what shooting somebody is and all that, like especially the mentality that we grew up in, and then they left, and I went back up to the train station, and now I'm in a t-shirt and a blizzard, and my mind starts thinking, I'm like, wow, that was crazy, like this and that, and I'm tripping out. And then I was like, yo, they're gonna come back. Fuck this. I was like, I'm running to the next station. So I jump into the train tracks, and I'm running from Central Avenue to Knickerbocker on the train. And like I said, back then the train tracks, the catwalk was wood, and thank God there was snow, because the snow, you could see where the missing planks of wood were, because there was no snow there. You would just see down to the street. So I was like walking, carefully, because it was slippery. It was like 2-3 inches of snow on the wood. And all of a sudden I hear in the street people yelling at me. And I look down, and it's the kids that just robbed me, see me up on the tracks, and they start like yelling at me. And I'm like, I look down, and I don't know if it was the acid or what, or if they were shooting at me, or if they shot up in the air, but they just started licking shots off. And I didn't look to see. I just started running my ass off, and I was tripping so hard trying not to like slip or fall, and I ran past Knickerbocker's train station, and I remember there was a few people there, like 2 people or something like that, and I remember like catching eyes with them as I was running by in the tracks, and they were like looking at me like it was like a weird thing, like see the skinny little young white kid with no jacket on his storm running by in the tracks, and then I passed Knickerbocker station, and I kept going because I thought they were going to try to cut me off at Knickerbocker. I was getting into the paranoid state of it. And then between Knickerbocker and Wyckoff, I see behind me the snow starts to light up. And it was a train coming behind me, and it was like really close. I didn't see it until last minute, probably because I was tripping so hard. And the dude stopped the train, and he opens the front door, and he's like this chubby guy, like with a thick Brooklyn accent, and he's like, "Yo, kid, what the fuck you doing?" You know, like, and I looked at him. I'm like, "Yo, I got robbed," and he was like, "Oh shit!" So he grabs my arm and he pulls me into the front door, and he's like, "Yo, have a seat," you know, and he gets on the CB and he's like calling in for like to report it or whatever, right? And like I'm like thinking like, wow, now I'm safe. That was crazy, you know? And then my mind starts to think like, fuck, they're gonna call my parents because I'm underage. I'm tripping on acid. I can't deal with this. I can't deal with police. You know, I'm like, fuck this. Wyckoff Avenue, doors open. I ran off, and he's like, "Where you going? Where you going? The cops are coming." I was like, fuck that. So I get down to the street. I'm Myrtle and Wyckoff, and I called VE's house because I knew he was home. Well, I didn't know he was home, but I knew he didn't come to the club with us, and I didn't know who else to call. So I couldn't go home because I was tripping out so hard. So he's like, "Yeah, I'm at the house. Just come through." Because his mom was always down to let people come through. Like his house was the house like everyone could go chill at whatever time and then stuff like that. So I start walking from Myrtle to Wyckoff all the way to where he lived, which is by 80th and Myrtle, which is probably around 2 miles in a blizzard in a t-shirt. And I remember when I got to like Central, I'm not Central, Cooper and Myrtle Avenue. I ran into Mag, FYA, rest in peace. Uh, I always say it. I have too many rest in pieces in my stories. Um, but he saw me and he was like, "Yo, what the fuck you doing, bro?" I was like, "I got robbed," and he thought I was kidding, you know. And I just kept walking to VE's house. I got to VE's house. I rang the bell, and his mom, Karen, she opened the door. She always called me Giz. She goes, "Giz, what are you doing?" She's like, "You got snow all over you," because my arms got so cold. I didn't feel it, but they got so cold that the snow built up on the hair of my arms. And she was like brushing it off. She was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, it's like I'm here to see Jimmy." I didn't want to tell her I got robbed. So I went upstairs, and just ironically, VE was upstairs with this dude Den and Send and this guy Wit, and they just all four of them happened to be tripping out on acid, and they were like, "Yo, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Yo, I got robbed," and I just said it just like casually like that, and they just were like, "All right, like whatever," and like we just had a great night the rest of the night because we were all tripping on acid. And then like nobody really took it serious that I got robbed until the next day because that black kid, I'm not gonna mention what he writes because I know who he is. Found out later on, was bragging all over Bushwick about it, and everybody found out and they were like, "Oh shit," you know, like you got robbed. I was like, "Yeah, no shit," you know, like I didn't walk 2 miles in the blizzard with in a t-shirt for nothing, you know. So yeah, that was my first drug and chemical experience, but it was just goes to show like taking the train in the 90s what could happen, you know. I mean, I could have, it's crazy because like I could have very well ended up killed. It would have been never solved, you know, because if that kid decided to shoot me, it would have went up through my head into my brain probably the angle he had. But I had a bruise from the that's how hard he was pushing on it, you know. And yeah, and he ended up dying anyway, that kid.
Holy shit, man. It really puts things into perspective.
Yeah, that's just one night, man. I got so many crazy stories. I'm in the middle of trying to compile it because of all the people that died and their stories aren't told. I want to tell those stories.
Yeah.
So initially, I wanted to write a book about me, and then I was like, "Fuck it, I want to write a book about like my generation growing up in the '90s and telling the story of the transition of graffiti from the trains to the streets because that's
Yeah.
not really told.
Yeah.
People talk about the '80s all day long. There's hundreds of books about the '80s
Yeah.
and trains, you know, and that stuff, which is cool, but it's overlooked the transition and how much footwork it took to go all city, you know, in the '90s. And people didn't have cars, you know, we were young. It was hard to get paint. There was no like, you know, burner cans. You know, they have those
Yeah.
fast ass cans now. You can do hot boy spot real quick.
You just had the basics.
Yeah, you had that's why it worked out good work with VE and SN, because if it was a really hard spot, we had two people looking out, one person rocking. If it wasn't that bad, we had one person looking out, two people rocking, and then take turns. Which we had good cover and stuff like that. And yeah, it was definitely a lot of stories that need to be told.
How is it transitioning into a period of your life where you're open to speaking more, you're open to showing your face, and you're doing, projects within the realm of graffiti, but, doing art as well, doing sculptures and being able to make money off of this lifetime career that you've experienced and went through. How is that? And what was the choice in doing that?
I'll tell you, it's bugged out. I never ever, like, growing up and bombing, all the years I bombed and things I've done, and even like when I was doing pieces and ending up in all these magazines that were all over the world, when people were kind of making magazines out of their houses, you know what I mean? Like, not really published. It was more like a color Xerox that they got access to, and then they would make these magazines and showing up in those. But never would I have ever thought that I would be selling or making money or living off of just graffiti, you know? And the one thing I try to do with my art, the way I see it, is that, like, a lot of people that have a graffiti background, they end up getting into fine art, but they change. They do fine art, like they they don't do their graffiti. I always keep my graffiti in the fine art, no matter what.